Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I hope you're doing well. You, your family, your team, everyone around you. I want to talk today about numbers, about outcomes, goals. Now, look, so many things in life and in business focus on numbers. I'm someone who, for better or worse, has been kind of obsessed with numbers for much of my life. I'm a three on the Enneagram, which means I'm a performer, achiever, personality type. I'm a former, college and professional baseball player. And if you know anything about baseball, even if you don't follow the game much, there's like so many statistics and numbers, and it's all about batting average and earned run average and how many of this and how many of that. And it's just numbers, numbers, numbers. You know, all the years I was in school, grades were based on, right? Percentages we were getting in classes. I've run my own business for the last 25 years. And in order to plan and track, numbers are so important to everything that we do. Most of the clients that I work with, and the teams, whether it's a sales team or any team inside of a big corporation or a mid-sized company or a small business, like there are numbers that we're constantly paying attention to. You go to the doctor, they take your weight, they look at your vitals, you get tests done, you get blood work done. It's numbers, 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 right? So numbers are a fundamentally important aspect of life, of business, of so many things that we do. And this is not in any way to say that numbers aren't important. They are. It's just, I think that many of us, myself included, get obsessed with numbers and outcomes in a way that doesn't always serve us. So I want to talk a little bit about this. Why is this? First of all, why are we so obsessed with numbers? Well, again, whether you think of yourself as a numbers person or not, or you like to track data and, statistics or not, like there is an element of numbers being able to give us a sense as to where we are, right? Again, if you ever played sports or you watch sports, like the score kind of matters, right? Are we winning? Are we losing? What's happening? And if you follow a sports team over the span of a season, how many wins do we have? How many losses do we have? What place are we in? When all the way back from when we were in school, it's like, did I get, a 95% or a 45% on the test? Like that's the difference between an A and an F. It kind of matters. And, so this obsession that we have with numbers from a very young age, we start to realize like, oh, high numbers are better than low numbers for the most part. I mean, unless we're talking about things like golf or, maybe the number on the scale in weight or whatever the case may be. But either way, even if we want a lower number versus a higher number, in something, on a blood test or whatever it else is we're tracking, there's still this fixation and obsession with the numbers, the results, the outcomes. And, sometimes it can be very exciting to focus on numbers, especially if they're good. Sometimes it can be pretty stressful and challenging to focus on the numbers if they're not where we want them to be, right? We're looking at debt numbers, we're looking at, sales numbers maybe that aren't anywhere close to the goal or whatever that is. So often it's our relationship with the numbers that's even more important than the numbers themselves. Like as I'm recording this, it's September. So, we're still in the third quarter of the year. You may be listening to or watching this at a different time of the year, but like as we get to the end of a month or the end of a quarter or the end of a year, especially, we're often looking at, especially in business, right? We're looking at the numbers and how did we do? And then maybe some of our clients are in annual planning season right now or planning for the new year. What are the numbers going to be for next year? Look, and one of the things that's going on in the world today is there's so much change, there's so much disruption, there's so much uncertainty. It can be challenging to even figure out what are the plans, what are the numbers, what should we expect to generate, to invest, to, right? That can be a tricky thing. And even in more stable times, it's often challenging, right? And whenever I speak at like a sales kickoff meeting or some kind of, it could be fiscal year starts in July or August, or the annual year starts in, obviously January, or for a retail company in February. When I'm at those kickoff events and we're talking about the new year, it's like, look, there are targets for the year, there are goals for the year. How are we going to do on those goals? Nobody knows. And by the end of the year, you're either going to hit the goal or not. And no matter what happens, the new year is going to start and then you're going to get another one. And if you do really well and increase your, surpass your goal, I should say, usually you get a bigger one the next year. I was at an event last week, actually in Bangalore, with one of our clients, and I was doing a workshop with the sales leadership team. And one of the leaders in the group said, you know, there's two things that never go down, your age or your quota. And all the sales leaders were laughing, meaning like it just keeps growing, it just keeps expanding. So the thing about numbers, whether we are really obsessed with numbers or not, they tend to have a pretty big impact on our lives, understandably. But what's your relationship with numbers? How do you think about numbers? How do you think about goals and outcomes? And again, I often talk about this around the beginning of the year when we're setting new goals for the year. But I think it's important because recently I had an insight as I was thinking about this with myself. Like I was thinking about it in terms of money and financial planning. And, I'm somebody who didn't grow up with very much money. And not only did we not have much money in my family, we didn't talk much about money. I didn't get a lot of like financial education, if you will. And even going through school and graduating from high school and then going to college and, playing some professional baseball and then getting my first real job after baseball and living in San Francisco when I was young and getting my first apartment. And like, I didn't really know what I was doing as it related to money specifically. And, Michelle and I got married and we bought a house and we had a baby and then we had another baby. And, fast forward to it's like 15, 17 years ago. And we end up in the middle of the Great Recession, the financial crisis. And I've written about this a bit in my book, Nothing Changes Until You Do. We ended up in a pretty difficult financial situation. We were underwater in our house. We were pretty significantly in debt. And, the business was impacted quite a bit by the recession. And so now here I was married with a house and a mortgage and two young children. We had a baby and a toddler, and like we were broke. And it was scary. If you've gone through financial challenges, you know what that feels like. And I had, grown up without a lot of money, but this was the first real experience as an adult and as a husband and a father where I just felt that weight of like, I don't know if I can really support our family. Like, I'm scared. This is overwhelming. And, it was scary, it was challenging, it was painful. Michelle and I had to have a lot of really hard conversations with each other. And what came out of that experience for us, as difficult as it was, as painful as it was, as embarrassing as it was a realization of like, wow, I don't have a really strong relationship with money and budgeting and planning and saving and some of the basics that maybe other people either learned earlier on in life or were taught or just figured out, but I hadn't figured that out myself. And at the time, Michelle and I both made a real commitment to like, we're going to make some changes, we're going to figure some things out. And thankfully, we were able to do so. It didn't happen overnight, but we were able to turn things around over the next several years financially and get ourselves into a much better situation. And part of the process that I really took on during that time was like, I'm going to get really, really specific about the numbers. And as we plan and as we budget and as we hopefully are able to start saving and fast forward 15, 17 years later, my relationship to numbers and our financial situation and how we manage our personal finances as well as how I manage our business, very different than it was all those years ago. Understandably, the world's changed, I've grown, I'm, a different age than I was at that time and all of those things. But more recently, what I realized is like there was still a part of me that had a lot of fear and scarcity around numbers, specifically related to money, but just in general. And watching myself operate with a certain amount of fear or scarcity or obsessiveness about the numbers, what I've been inquiring into for myself and thinking about this more broadly for us as humans, as leaders and business owners and employees and people that have to navigate the world of numbers in our own personal world, again, with our finances and our health, with our children, maybe in their grades in school, whether they're in third grade or 11th grade or they're off in college, with, right, the stuff that we do and the plans that we make at work with budgets and navigating all the different aspects of change and disruption. There's so many different aspects of life where numbers are important. And we have to whether we want to or not, engage in them one way or the other. And maybe we avoid them or we deny them or we stick our head in the sand, or maybe we go to the opposite extreme, like I've noticed with myself, where we get really obsessive about them and we're constantly looking at numbers and tracking numbers. And again, not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but what if we could do it in a balanced way, in an empowering way, in a healthy way? What is the healthy way to relate to our numbers, to our goals, to the things that we track, to the things that we pay attention to? Many of us are wearing all these, wearable technologies, whether it's an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or whatever, and we're getting lots of data and information back about sleeping and heart rate and wonderful things. But like, what are we doing with all of that information? What are we making that mean? And again, our relationship to the numbers is super important in our ability to both have some freedom and some effectiveness if we want to move the numbers in a certain direction, right? We want to expand our capacity for growth, for, revenue, for whatever, fill in the blank. So here are a few things that I have been thinking about that I can do, that we can do, that you can do as it relates to shifting our relationship with numbers. The first thing is important for us to do is just check in with ourselves. What is your relationship to numbers, to goals, to data, to, right? Whether we're talking about, again, personal finances, whether we're talking about budgets at work, if you're responsible for, some annual planning thing, whether we're talking about, grades in school for ourselves or our kids, whether we're talking about, health data and information that we're getting from some wearable technology that we're using, or some, blood test or other tests that we take when we go to the doctor, or anything else. It could be, followers on social media, or, views of a video on YouTube or whatever. Maybe you're someone who creates content like I do, maybe not, but those type of things, are numbers everywhere. But what's your relationship to that? How do you think about that? Do you not pay attention to it on purpose because it's uncomfortable, or you don't like it, or it's scary, or it's weird? Do you pay a lot of attention to it and attach a lot of value to it? Do you track it obsessively? Do you not really care at all one way or the other? Again, there's no right or wrong way, but just to take stock and take inventory of what's my relationship to the numbers in my life. Is it supportive? Is it empowering? Does it help me? Does it enliven me or stress me out? Just to kind of notice, where am I at this moment in my life as it relates to the most important numbers, goals, outcomes, data, statistics, if you will, of my work, of my life. The second thing that's important for us to do is to remember that the scoreboard is not the game. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, I played baseball for all those years. I used to play basketball in high school as well. And whether you played sports a lot or not, most sports, there is some kind of scoreboard or leaderboard, or right. And when I was on the field playing the baseball game, I would look at the scoreboard sometimes because like the count was up there, or where we were, what inning it was. But the scoreboard is telling a story about what's happening on the field or in the game. It's not the game itself. If the scoreboard says it's 5-3, one team's winning, one team's losing, that's telling the story of what's happened during the game, but that's not the game itself. The game is happening on the field. And understanding this simple, but I think profound distinction is super important. The report we get back, the monthly report or the quarterly report of how are we doing relative to our goals, or the meeting we have with our financial advisor, or even the meeting we have with our doctor as he or she looks at the blood work we just took, or the tests that were just, the result of the x-ray or whatever. Like, those are the scoreboards, if you will, for lack of a better way to describing it. It's not the actual game. The real game is happening in real time on the field of life. It's dynamic. There's ups, there's downs, there's good things, there's challenging things, there's enjoyable things and not so enjoyable things. And it's constantly moving and changing. And the scoreboard, as important as it is to take inventory from time to time about how's it going, how are we doing, it's not the game. It's just data for what's so in any given moment. And I think what happens is we attach a lot of value, a lot of meaning to the score, forgetting that, wait a minute, I'm on the field. I get to play the game however I want. Right? The third thing that's important for us to do is, once we've paid attention to what's our relationship to the numbers, to the scoreboard, if you will, and remember that the scoreboard is not the game, The third thing we can do is start to alter our relationship to those numbers in a way that's most empowering. Like, and again, it's different for each of us. There's not just a one size fits all, but what information do I need? What helps me? What supports me in understanding what's happening? What empowers me versus what stresses me out? If I'm constantly avoiding the numbers because I'm scared of them, or I don't want to look at them, or I'm worried it's going to make me feel bad, or I have shame or confusion, that's one aspect of disempowerment. Another aspect, one I can relate to a little bit more, that one I could relate to more from in the past. But another aspect could be, okay, I'm obsessed with them. I'm constantly looking at the numbers. I'm so obsessed. I can't stop. I'm looking, I'm updating them, I'm checking them, I'm refreshing, okay, that can be disempowering in a different way. It becomes all about the numbers. And then we're not really thinking about what we're doing or why we're doing it or who's involved or what's the real impact. We're getting so obsessed with the numbers and we're letting the numbers dictate. So, what would be a healthy balance of those for you? How do you bring it into balance? So I have an awareness, I have an understanding, I have some context around what's happening. I'm not obsessed, but I'm also not avoiding and denying. Finding that healthy sense of balance, that way in which the numbers actually support me and empower me to understand what's going on. And there are certain times in life and with certain situations, we may need to dig more deeply into any particular set of numbers, and other times when we need to maybe pull away because they're not that important, if you will. And then fourthly, having people around us that we can talk to about the numbers. I remember years ago, this was long before that stretch that I talked about where Michelle and I really ran into, financial challenges in our marriage and as a family. But I was watching, I think it was the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. I was watching Susie Orman, who's an author and, financial expert on PBS, and she was talking about debt, credit card debt. And she was saying that many people, most people, in fact, have credit card debt, but we have a lot of shame around it. A lot of times we don't talk about it. We're embarrassed about it. And what she was advising people to do at this time, and I imagine she probably has similar advice these days, is to talk about it. Tell people, hey, I have $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 in credit card debt, whatever it is. She goes, because if you start talking about it, you'll find out two things. First of all, it'll alleviate some of the shame. And second of all, you'll find out that a lot of other people have credit card debt too. You're not the only one. And while she wasn't advocating that people carry a lot of credit card debt, in fact, she was talking about and trying to teach ways to not end up in a lot of debt, credit card or otherwise. What she was really underscoring is that oftentimes when we feel ashamed or we get embarrassed about something, we don't talk about it. And that keeps it stuck. So whether we're talking about money or debt or finances, or whether we're talking about, our sales numbers at work, or whether we're talking about, other aspects of data and numbers that are important. Now, again, we don't have to broadcast it to the whole world. You don't have to post on social media about certain things. I mean, you can if you want to, but do you have people close to you, around you, that you work with, that you live with, who you can talk to, both about the numbers specifically, so you're not hiding them, but also about numbers in general? Because there are people in your life who have different perspectives on, right? Have you ever noticed other people's numbers don't have the same emotional charge as ours? Like, you could send me a spreadsheet of your entire financial situation, and I would just look at it like a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. Now, you have a lot of emotional attachment to the whole thing. Or you could send me an email that says, here's my sales quota and here's how I'm doing relative to the quota. Or you could send me, some blood work that you got back from the doctor. And even if there was some concerning areas for you, I would look at it again as just like an email or a spreadsheet or a piece of paper with a bunch of numbers on them. And hopefully I would understand what they all meant, but I wouldn't attach the same meaning to them as you, because they're not mine, because I'm not emotionally attached to them. Right? And then the final thing that's important for us to remember in life in general is it's never really about the numbers. It's usually about the people or the goal or the dream or the vision that we have. It's some combination of the people and the vision. Always way more important than the numbers. Remember, it's just the scoreboard. It's just a report card. It's just feedback for what's happened up to this point. That's all it is. And if we want to be great leaders and parents and spouses and friends and humans, we want to really connect with and support and empower the people around us, remembering that it's always more about the people and the vision than it is about the numbers. That creates some freedom. It's not that the numbers aren't important. They are. They're just not as important as we often make them. So what can you do to shift and transform your relationship with the key numbers in your life in a way that empowers you, in a way that supports you, in a way that brings you closer together to the people that you work with and live with and are, doing the most important things you're doing together, and that brings you closer to yourself, to a more peaceful, healthy perspective and inspiring place, if you will. Because look, there are a lot of important numbers for us to focus on in life, clearly, but we can definitely shift our relationship to them in a way that supports and empowers us. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. As always, make sure to hit the follow or the subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work and to life. And remember, we're all in this thing together.